Nietzsche described your life before you began living it, not your specific circumstances, your pattern, the shape of the existence you are currently inside, the accommodations, the safe choices, the carefully maintained mediocrity, disguised as contentment. He saw all of it over 130 years ago. He wrote it down with brutal precision. He predicted the exact kind of man you have become. And he was not writing about you specifically. He was writing about the default condition of men who never confront what they actually are. You are the default condition. And Nietzsche saw it coming. He called it the last man. The man who has smoothed every rough edge, eliminated every genuine risk, traded every burning ambition for comfortable security. The man who lives quietly, works steadily, avoids controversy, pursues small pleasures, and dies, having never once asked himself whether any of it meant anything. Not because he is stupid, not because he is lazy, because the last man has learned or been taught that asking that question produces nothing but discomfort. So he never asks it, and he calls the not asking wisdom. The last man is not tragic in the dramatic sense. His life does not contain great disasters. That is precisely the point. Nietzsche saw that the modern man's tragedy would not be visible as tragedy. It would wear the mask of a successful life. It would look from the outside like everything was working. Job, relationships, routines, achievements, all present, all functional, all utterly hollow beneath the presentation. Consider what you have optimized: the comforts, the convenience, the efficiency of your routines, the specific way you have arranged your existence to minimize friction and maximize predictability. Nietzsche watched men doing exactly this in the late 1800s and understood precisely where it was heading. He saw that the optimization of comfort would eventually eliminate the conditions under which genuine meaning becomes possible. He was right. Look around. Look at yourself. Nietzsche understood something most men still refuse to grasp. Comfort is not neutral. Comfort is a force. It shapes what you become. The man who optimizes for comfort does not remain the same man, plus more comfort. He becomes a different man, a smaller one, a quieter one, a man with less internal architecture because he has built nothing that required struggle to construct. Comfort produces a specific kind of atrophy that is invisible from the inside because it removes the very conditions under which you would have noticed yourself shrinking. You have been shrinking for years. You have been calling it maturity. The last man's greatest achievement is his ability to feel satisfied. Not content in the deep sense, satisfied in the shallow sense. The specific satisfaction of a man whose expectations have been so thoroughly adjusted downward that the diminished life he now leads feels like achievement. He feels good about himself. He feels like things are working. He feels the absence of acute pain and interprets it as the presence of genuine living. And he has no idea what has been traded to produce that feeling. Nietzsche called this the death of the Overman, the death of the kind of man who refuses comfortable diminishment in favor of something more demanding, more honest, more terrifying, and more alive. The Overman is not a superior being in the simple sense. He is simply a man who has looked directly at the conditions of his existence and chosen to create values rather than inherit them. To live from genuine self-assessment rather than inherited approval. To pursue what he actually wants rather than what the culture has trained him to desire. Almost no one becomes this. not because it is impossible, because it requires the willingness to be uncomfortable in a way the last man cannot tolerate. You have not tolerated it, not once, not for any sustained period. Every time genuine discomfort has approached you, you have moved away from it, not consciously, not as a deliberate choice, but through the accumulated small movements toward safety that eventually shape a life. The conversation you did not have, the risk you did not take, the truth you did not speak, the desire you did not pursue. Each of these felt reasonable in the moment. Each of them was the last man choosing himself over the man you could have been. Nietzsche saw all of this. He described it with a clarity that is, frankly, painful to read honestly. He wrote about the man who consoles himself with distractions, the man who fills his life with entertainments so continuous that the underlying question of whether his existence has any genuine direction never surfaces long enough to demand an answer. The man who measures his life by the accumulation of small pleasures and the avoidance of moderate pains, and considers the sum of these measurements to be a life well lived. This is not someone else's life. This is yours. You know it is yours. You have been living it. The accumulation of distractions is not incidental. It is the primary mechanism by which the last man maintains his existence. Because the last man cannot survive genuine silence. Silence is where the questions surface. Silence is where the specific discomfort of a meaningless existence becomes visible. Silence is where something in the man that has been buried for years begins to press against the construction and demand to be heard. The last man has organized his entire life to prevent silence. You have organized your entire life to prevent silence. Count the minutes in your day when you are not consuming something. Not content, not food, not stimulation, not the management of your own reactions through the absorption of someone else's production. Count the actual minutes of genuine unfilled consciousness. For most men, the count arrives at near zero. The last man does not experience solitude. He experiences brief interruptions between distractions, and he calls the interruptions uncomfortable precisely because silence was never the natural state of his life. Silence was where he would have met himself. He has been avoiding that meeting for decades. Nietzsche understood that this avoidance is not cowardice, in the simple sense. It is something more insidious. It is the rational response to the specific conditions the last man has built. Because what he has built is a life that cannot survive examination. The moment he looks directly at the shape of his existence, at the accumulated small compromises, at the values he has inherited rather than chosen, at the version of himself he has been performing for an audience he has never questioned, the construction begins to collapse, and there is nothing beneath it to replace what is lost. This is the last man's specific terror, not death, not suffering, the possibility that there is nothing of him beneath the construction, that the examined life would reveal the unexamined life was the only life he had. Nietzsche's proposed alternative was not comfortable. He was not offering a self-help program. He was describing a transformation so demanding that most men would refuse it, even when the alternative was slow psychological death. The Overman does not have a better life. He has a more demanding life, a life that requires continuous choice, continuous creation of value, continuous willingness to sit with the discomfort of not being handed meaning, by the culture around him. Most men prefer the handed meaning, even when the handed meaning is nothing. The last man has been handed a package that tells him what to want, what to pursue, what to value, what to fear, what to aspire to. He did not create this package. He inherited it. He received it without examination and has been operating within its parameters ever since. The specific shape of his ambitions, the particular career trajectory, the particular relationship pattern, the particular markers of success he is pursuing, none of these originated in him. They were delivered by the cultural environment he grew up in, and he has been performing someone else's script while calling it his life. Nietzsche saw this mechanism operating at the civilizational level. He predicted that modern man would become expert at performing inherited scripts while losing all capacity to ask whether the scripts themselves were worth performing. He was right. You are the proof. Consider the ambitions you are currently pursuing, not the surface descriptions, the underlying structure. Do you want the career you are building because the work itself produces meaning for you, or because the position it occupies in the cultural hierarchy is something you have been trained to value? Do you want the relationship shape you are pursuing because it actually fits what you are as a human being, or because it matches the template the culture presented as the correct trajectory? Do you want the achievements you are chasing because they reflect genuine personal direction, or because they are the achievements that would make you legible to people whose approval you have been seeking your entire life? For most men, the honest answers are uncomfortable enough that the questions remain unasked. Nietzsche's writing about the eternal recurrence was not a metaphysical claim. It was a psychological test. He asked his readers to imagine that they would have to live their exact life over and over again. Every moment, every choice, every small compromise, every accumulated mediocrity, for eternity. The test was simple. Would you want to? Would you relive the existence you are currently constructing? For most men, the answer is a horror they cannot afford to face, because the honest answer would require them to immediately change everything about the life they are building. And the last man's construction is not designed for that kind of reckoning. So he avoids the test. He consumes the distractions. He maintains the routines. He pursues the inherited ambitions. He tells himself the version of his life that allows him to keep building it without examining its foundations. And the years pass, and the construction continues. And somewhere beneath all of it, the man who might have existed, the Overman Nietzsche described, grows fainter and fainter until he can no longer be distinguished from nothing. Nietzsche saw this fate as avoidable. He was wrong about one thing. He believed that naming it clearly would be enough to inspire men to transcend it. 130 years later, we know that most men who read his work recognize the diagnosis, agree with it intellectually, and then go immediately back to the life he was describing. You have been diagnosed. The diagnosis was delivered over a century ago. The specific pattern you are currently inside was mapped before your grandparents were born, and you are still performing it.